Hi guys, so just finished my embracing change workshop today. So it was what I was talking about in the previous video, which is like wellness, mind yourself, but also meditation program as well. So just kind of teaching you how to be in the workplace, and also like if there's conflict, how to kind of put the shit into perspective. You know what I mean? So it's not all your fault, but also to kind of realize that the people you're dealing with might be having a bad day and are not necessarily happy if they're behaving the way they are. And look, I get that it's definitely hard. I find it hard to have. I don't find it hard to empathise with people, but I find it hard to be nice to someone who's not being nice to me. Put it that way, you know. Um, you can't go around shouting at people, but at the same time, it's kind of like I'm not being pleasant to this person. I'll either just say nothing, bite my tongue because I know I'm gonna lash out at them, or I'll get annoyed, and I'll hold on to that for the rest of the day. So some useful skills definitely. Very good to meet Suzanne Power again. Really warm and welcoming person, and I mean that genuinely. Not just saying it. She just has an air about her of acceptance, just a gentle soul, which is good to see. Um, and that's somebody that I'd ever take advantage of, but unfortunately there are people out there that will, and I did voice my concerns. If I do act in a certain way towards people, do they get that as an invitation that we can exploit this fella? You know what I mean? So you got to be careful. I also met with her husband afterwards, Albie, which is nice fella as well. He's a teacher. I was talking about a potential job over the summer, which would be dealing with disabled kids. A lot of them would be neurodivergent in terms of, say, they'd have ADHD or they'd be extreme on the spectrum. They'd be on the extreme end of the autism spectrum. Is what I meant to say. Some of them, he said, because I had a good chat with him, and he said some of them can't read or write. Some of them are non-verbal. Um, because I asked him like, would they be on the regular curriculum? But no, they're on the lower functioning end, should we say, which would be the extreme end. But I know it's kind of confusing. But if you're on the higher end of the spectrum, they say higher functioning, which is be like me. But I have a problem with that. I don't like that term, and that I think that feeds into my video nicely. So before even meeting with Albie, and going in for the Embrace Change workshop, I was on the bus on the way there this morning, and a lad got on who, like, I mean, I'm not going to be bad, but I could tell there was something up, be it autism or some sort of neurodivergence, just the way he was acting. I call it an ADAR, as I say. When they say gay lads have a gaydar, I have an ADAR, so I can detect. But yeah, I could just kind of detect something was up with him, and if I couldn't detect that, then there was a carer getting on with them, right? And I don't mean this video to have any offence for anybody, or to offend anyone, I should say, have any offence, but um, that can sometimes be just, that could be my neurodivergence right there, where I struggle to find the words sometimes. But yeah, it's interesting to think that at a certain point I was basically non-verbal. Now my parents will both deny that, but I remember not being able to talk to anybody. I could maybe talk to them, but I hated talking to strangers. I couldn't. Well, I mean, they say don't talk to strangers, so that's good. But I've come a long way, and even talking to Albie, it was interesting to chat with him, and he asked me, "How do you cope with it? Like, what's your way of coping? Because you're very put together, and you can. I mean, thank you, but you don't know what goes on in here. Um, there's a whole shit show going on. Um, he was kind of interested to learn. He's a very nice fella as well. The two of them are a very nice couple. Obviously very warm and welcoming, and that's good. I'd say their two sons are lucky to have them. And from what Suzanne said, their sons are really free spirits and, at ease with who they are, which I think is a great thing. One of her sons made a music video. He didn't sing in most of it, but he did the choreography for it and was brilliant. I was very impressed. I have to say. She said it's nothing special. It was like I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I guess it's definitely the perfect time to talk about this because on the bus journey on the way over, I was thinking of making a video on it, and then having spoken with Albie, and that's Albie, by the way. Having spoken to him, I really felt like, yeah, this is another reason to make this video. So I just found the way the care worker was speaking to the lad in the bus was quite pitying, you know. Do you like this and do you like that? And, like, what's your favourite colour and whatever. And he looked about, if I had to guess, I'd say 19 or 20 in age. Now, he could have been older. Sometimes it's harder to tell with neurodivergent people because they can be more childish. I certainly am in a lot of ways, but also developmentally, it's harder for you to catch up. And it feels like that a lot, that you're playing catch up. And I know, like, my earlier videos started out with autism and I kind of got away from that, but it's something I always come back to, and this will be one kind of talking about it. But do you ever feel like, not that we've become too accepting, because that's never a bad thing, but rather we pity people with disabilities way too much rather than actually expecting stuff from them? So, what I mean by that is, I've seen people who, and I've spoken to people as well who are in their 70s, as old as 70, and they got a diagnosis of autism very late in their life, but they are quite high functioning. But it was not without its challenges. So I have a big problem when people say you're high functioning, because I think to myself, well, doesn't that just mean that perhaps you overcame challenges? Because I definitely could have ended up like that, especially had my mum given in to all the doctors and everything and said, now put him on ritalin and get him hooked on these tablets, put him into a special school. And when I say special school, I mean like one for disabled kids, and neurodivergent kids. And that's what this school would be that I'm getting offered a job in. It's just going to be a part time one, but it could be fun. And I think it'd be a chance to help a few kids out. But I don't really know what to expect. We'll see how it goes. But it made me think, how many kids are we not giving any hope to? Or just basically saying, know your place and don't expect to achieve anything in life. Like, I get that people are not disabled, but different abled, if that's what you want to call it. I think a lot of times people are just slower to catch up on things and to pick up on things. And rather than go, give them time to do that, we go, oh no, they must have a label and they must have something slapped on them. Bang, there's your label. Um, Whereas I notice with people from older generations who clearly are on the spectrum, but they're a lot higher functioning, they just like to be on their own. At least they need their alone time, which I can completely relate to. Um, they don't find it easy in crowds, and like after socialising a lot, and I can relate to this 100%. They'll burn out and they'll need to have a bit of time off and retreat to themselves. Sometimes that's just like sitting in and not doing an awful lot, and I 100% get where they're coming from, and I need to do that. Like, I'm only able to make these videos and do all the stuff that I'm doing now because of a lot of fucking struggling. Like, it was no picnic. And I think we try and cosset people a lot nowadays and tell them that you don't have to struggle necessarily to get somewhere in life, but you do. It's not pleasant, you don't want it, and of course, you don't want your kids to struggle. I completely get that, but it's a part of life. We're only doing quotes from the Dalai Lama and the Buddha and all that, but um, I remember one that doesn't sound very pleasant, and it wouldn't be a favourite of mine, but to live is to suffer. And might sound quite bad, but what it means is you're going to suffer. That's another quote. Suffering is inevitable, but what's it? It'll come to me now. Um, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, something like that. Anyway, if you know, I'll put it down below. Um, Basically, what it means is, and like I'm paraphrasing, I'm getting it arseways, but it means that you will experience pain, but then how that carries on in your life depends on you. And it's a good way of saying you can choose what shit you allow bother you for the rest of your life, or you can process it and you can deal with it, and then bye bye, it's gone. Um, and I think what we're doing now is basically going, right, these kids are vulnerable, so wrap them in cotton wool, treat them like they're stupid, and don't ever give them any hope. You know, I just don't think our education system is set up to help young people who have any sort of deviation from the norm. And I don't just mean neurodivergent in that, I mean anyone who thinks differently and doesn't meet your stereotypical way of living and learning. They just are told you're thick, you're useless, and that's that. How many dyslexic people get told they're thick when in reality they just struggle to read like you and I would? But Leonardo da Vinci was dyslexic, W.B. Yeats was dyslexic, um, to name a few. There's a lot more that I could go on with, but they're actually very good at ciphers and solving puzzles and things like that. And how many brilliant autistic people are there out there? There's an awful lot. Einstein was said to be autistic. Alan Turing, the Enigma code. There were a few others, like Bill Gates was said to have it as well. Elon Musk. Now I do feel like we kind of get to the point where someone's a little bit odd, so they must be autistic, and that's not always the case. And then you hear unhelpful things like my mum, my dad always said it, oh sure, I've got a bit of that, and we all have a bit of that. It's like, you don't, you didn't have to go through the classes that I did, and you stand out, and I stood out like a sore thumb. I can't have been so high functioning if I was causing so many issues for everybody and diagnosed as young as I was, you know what I mean? There were a lot of behavioural issues, there was a lot of sensory issues, and I got in a lot of trouble. I couldn't relate to people, I felt fucking miserable, and that carried on even to this day. So when people say, oh, but you're only, you're very high functioning, so you're not that bad, get over yourself, basically, is what I feel. And other people are like, fair play to you, well done you. Um, and are very pleasant to listen to, and they're very much like, well, congratulations to you, like, well done, like, fair fucks to you. You've come a long way, because they know what people with autism can be like. And I'm not saying that, I just worked a lot harder than everybody else, because that's a pet peeve of mine. What I'm saying more so is, I kind of fucked myself in the deep end, and, sink or swim, and there was a lot of awkward moments, a lot of very painful moments, like when you're in a team and you can't socialise. And it is daunting, and not having the empathy that you need at the time. Like, my dad didn't say, oh, if you don't like it, we can come back another time. No, it was, go to fucking training. What do you want me to do? Hold your fucking hand. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, he's probably right. I should probably just do it. What would have been a better approach was, okay, you're overwhelmed now. We'll go back next week. I think. I don't think saying, oh, you don't like that, no problem, you don't have to do that. Or you don't like that, you don't have to. Um, because there will be struggles in life, inevitably, you know what I mean? Like, it's not going to be a picnic. And if you want to achieve anything in life, there's got to be a bit of struggle. As you say, though, I'm not a believer in this whole, I just work harder than you. Some people just get opportunities that you don't, but then you get opportunities that they don't, and other people. I feel like this comparative world that we live in, if that's even a word, but comparing ourselves to each other all the time, um, it's never going to make you happy. And people have struggles that you know nothing about. Um, like Suzanne has had so much trauma in her life. Does she ever compare and go, mine's worse than yours? Fuck no, you know what I mean? So I kind of feel like that's a mindset that I want to take forward. It's like, we all have shit to deal with. It might just be different, but it's a really good mindset to be in, because then you're not like, oh, I did more than you, I'm better than you, and all that shit. And I just wonder how many people are not being given a fighting chance or a hope in hell of succeeding because you're told, oh, you have a disability, here's some fucking pills, you've got this label now for the rest of your life. Never try and make any effort, you know, you don't have to because you're special, so you don't have to go out there and actually bother your arse. I wouldn't be nearly as confident as I am nowadays and be able to socialise if I just sat at home and done what was comfortable. Because there weren't a lot of things that I found comfortable. Would have been a fucking recluse or scared to leave my own house. You know, sometimes I just couldn't. I was too overwhelmed, and I'd leave the house for maybe an hour or so a day and maybe go out the back garden. But I found it very difficult, you know, especially on my own. I'd go out with friends, yeah, but when you're in your own company, you're like, oh, people will be looking at me thinking I'm a weirdo, and you know, what if people see me and laugh at me because they think, oh, Billy no mates or whatever, and you're kind of like, oh, fuck, you know, I'm always on my own. But I don't need to tell anyone about that anxiety feeling. There's not a hope in hell of me having done this channel if I hadn't gone through all the shit that I have. And I wanted it all to end, and I was all thinking, oh, why did this have to happen to me? But I wouldn't be able to share it with you guys, what I learned from it, had I not gone through the shit, you know. And I feel like a lot of autistic people can't do that. And it kind of boils my blood in a way when I see an autistic person going on the telly and it's like, oh, well done you spelt your name or you learned to speak for the first time, and people are kind of crying and you don't know if it's genuine or not. Look, if you're a parent and your child is non-verbal and then all of a sudden they start talking after years of saying nothing, I can imagine that's genuinely quite an emotional time. I am not saying that. um, as I say, we're all different and our experiences are different. But I think try something. It might not be easy, and if you keep struggling with it all the time, withdraw from it. But now that you've given it your all and you've tried, you know the amount of times it's, oh, you don't like this and you won't like that. And this has been said to me when I was only a child, because my mum said it to me. It was like, I came out saying, I can't do this because I have autism, I can't do that because I have autism. I didn't even know I had fucking autism till a doctor spoke to me and told me all the things I couldn't do. And then what did I start doing? I started saying, I can't do this because I have autism. Like, what fucking use is that? So what that says to me is that the medical industry and the educational professions, they're all saying you can't, or they're limiting you to, you know, special learning. And look, if there's a way for you to get the same education as everybody else, and maybe you have to have a deviation. Like for instance, I used to have in primary school, I would have like say a separate desk, and I'd be on my own because people bumping in, you know, and shaking and rattling drove me fucking mental. But then my mum said to me, "Oh, you're fine. You can sit with everybody else. You'll be fine." And I was kind of like, "Oh, she's probably right." Now, and she pushed me a lot. In fairness to her, but in this instance, I think it would have been better if I'd stayed the way I was because it was getting me through the days, you know. Um, but you also need to interact with other kids, and you don't want to be an outcast. And so it's a tricky one. I get that, but saying that lad on the bus makes me really think: how many kids are we not given a fighting chance to, or a hope in hell of succeeding? You know, there's a lot of parents that tend to go, "Oh, we tolerate this lad because he's a fucking nightmare to deal with," and that pisses me off. It's like, well, he didn't ask to be brought into the world, you know. I understand it's difficult, but how many people don't bother their arse? Like the amount of parents when I worked in a cafe that I used to see just handing a fucking screen to the kid and going, yeah, I'll deal with you in a second. You know, not acknowledging their kids. A kid will shut down more if their own fucking parents can't be arsed acknowledging their existence, you know, and speaking to them like they're a fucking simpleton. You know, like, well done, and you know, do you like the, oh yeah, what's your favourite colour and how old are you? And it's like, don't talk to them like they're a fucking simpleton all the time. And look, people learn at different levels and all that stuff, but I feel like I've seen kids that like were from the area that I grew up in, and I remember seeing a few of them that you kind of thought were a little bit odd, yeah, but they were given into and brought to special school and had a carer and all, and they're 10 times worse than they ever were. They haven't improved, they've regressed. haven't progressed, they've regressed, and you think to yourself, could that have been me? And genuinely think like that because that's what pushed me to kind of go and try everything. And I mean, making these YouTube videos is kind of like a eureka moment. I was very bad. Like when I think back, I was quite bad, really. Almost non-verbal. Certainly couldn't communicate with people my own age, and young women, not a fucking chance. Which is why I'm grateful that I can now, but I'm still having trouble in the dating scene. We'll get there. We'll get there. Touch wood. But I think I talked about this before on this channel, but I spoke about an older gentleman that I saw who had autism, and he was in his 50s, and it was really regimented, so I can't really act it out for you, but you can imagine a table and a plate, and like they say, autistic people are creatures of habit, and which we are, yeah, but I've had to adapt because lots of stuff has changed in my life that wasn't in my control, which has actually made me quite scatterbrained at times, because I'm like, I can't have my routine and all this stuff because it's been broken and it's not in my control. And my mum and dad were always very stressed out. There was a lot of shit going on, so life ain't perfect, and you got to deal with it. But I remember seeing this fella, and he was on his own, no expressions, blank. He'd one plate, one knife, one fork, one spoon. He ate the same thing every day. He went to and from work. It was like a robot, and I just thought, fuck that. I do not want to end up like that. I know that might sound harsh to the poor guy, but I thought if I end up like that, I'd rather top myself, with just no interaction with anybody, struggling to communicate. And look, empathy, of course, I feel it, but I'm kind of also like, if I don't try new things, I could end up like that. Because that's one thing with autism is you're very rigid in your structure. You don't like change. You won't try new things. It's all can't, won't, don't. And I hate that shit. It's kind of like, why not? Give it a go. Like, for fuck's sake. You never know unless you try it, as they say. Yeah, I hated textures of foods, but in fairness to my mum, she made me try foods. She didn't force feed me. I just want to clarify that. She would place foods in a different arrangement. So, like, say, spaghetti bolognese. That was one where it's real messy and sloppy, and I didn't like it. So, what I preferred was if I'd have the mince separate and then the spaghetti. Couldn't fucking remember spaghetti for a second there, but I'd have it separate, and then I didn't like the sloppiness, and the just real moist, dirty foods, if you like. The sensation was horrible, but I got there from trying, and eating it, and there's now I'll eat fucking anything. I feel like a lot of people are giving up on neurodivergent people, and they don't even know them, and they haven't given them a chance at all. Like Seamus, who does the works for the local development group with me, he's a lovely fella, really polite, really buzzing, to meet everybody, like real smiley, and makes a real effort though. You know what I mean? Again, I could tell he was autistic because I've got to say there, but he's very polite. He makes such an effort to say hello to people. You don't have to drag it out of him. He'll say it. He'll open up a conversation. He's a bit different to me, but fair fucks to him. He's a nice fella, and he participates in everything. Every opportunity given to him, he takes it. And I love to see that. That's things we love to see. So a massive shout out to Seamus. I'd hate to think that there's people not believed in. Like, I mean, it's easy to go, oh, I'm disabled, so I shouldn't be held to the same standards as everybody else. Um, like that's why I think I have a sense of duty that I have to look after my mum and help her out in any way I can because she's done it for me, and then my brother, to a degree, and he does his bit for me as well. So help each other, you know what I mean? I don't think it's fair for me to just go, I'm autistic, so you deal with your own shit, and then I'm gonna just worry about myself, and that's it. That good enough for you? Grand, off I go now. No, and it's a real rewarding sense. Like when I got my first summer job, and I worked in places that were quite toxic masculinity, I would say, quite toxic masculine places to work. Um, And I thought it was all bad. It wasn't. It taught me that these places can be quite miserable and gave me a respect, though. Do you know what I mean? That you are not top dog. These lads would eat you alive. You know what I mean? Quite literally, some of them. Fuck. Um, but you learn to grow a thicker skin, and I mean that literally, not just a throwaway comment, which my dad always said, grow a thicker skin, but through trial and error, I've really just grown tougher as a human being, and I've also learned what I will and won't accept. Because if you put yourself out there as a neurodivergent person, I can't guarantee that you won't get hurt. And I have to be honest, like you are more vulnerable. And if you've got no strong male figures, as I always talk about, that's even more so. Do you know what I mean? And I hate to think of that, because I hear stuff that makes me really upset when I hear that, young lads with autism go to the shop and they don't know that things cost a certain amount, let's say. So they think, and I was like this when I was a kid myself. My mum used to laugh about it. Now the shopkeeper was honest and would always give me the correct change, in fairness, but they should. But these autistic lads were handing the money, and the shopkeeper kept it all. And then the mum had to go down and say, "Excuse me, did you take all my son's money? Like it only cost this amount." And she even said she wanted to let them go to the shop just to see how they got on. And my mum did the same thing, which I understand. You want to see, can they do it themselves, and it's a good lesson for them. But the shopkeeper keeping the fucking money, you're like, you would be nervous, wouldn't you? Like, in fairness, it's horrible to think there are people like that, but there are, sadly, and you can't protect everyone forever. You can do your damnedest, but if the more you do, the less prepared they'll be when they get to adulthood. But as I'm getting to this age now, and I'm getting older and realizing I don't really regret that much necessarily, because life ain't perfect. We have this ideal view, no suffering, no nothing, and no pain. But you grow from it if you can survive it. You know what I mean? Thank God, touch wood again, that I have. Um, Somehow I've come out the other end, and I'm delighted and I'm grateful for that. Because hopefully I can help other people, and it has not been easy. So when someone says they're high functioning autistic, that does not mean that their life has been any easier than someone who would be lower functioning. A lot of times I feel the lower functioning people are those who have been given into and allowed to just be selfish, even, and to kind of do their own thing, and but also not being allowed to live. Like being given medication and told, "Good boy, well done," a pat on the head for the stupidest shit. And I think I could say that as an autistic person, being patronised all the time and patted on the head is so fucking annoying. And it's been done to me before, and I mean, I don't know if there's anyone out there who is autistic who feels the same way, but we're not fucking simpletons. You know what I mean? We just have different ways of learning. Like sometimes I can look incredibly stupid because people won't explain stuff to me quite literally, and I'm like, how do you want me to do it exactly? And they won't explain it correctly, and I'll do it, and I'll deviate slightly from what they expected, and then they'll give out to me like I'm thick, and then I'll feel really embarrassed. But it's like, you didn't show me properly, so how the fuck was I supposed to know? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, use your brain, and I'm like, fuck off. That doesn't help anyone, by the way. Use your brain. But how about you actually use your communication skills? I'm supposed to be the one lacking in them. Yet people have told me that I'm better at communicating instructions than anyone. And I think I'm pretty good at it, because I understand what it's like to not get proper instructions, so I will show someone how to do something. It's funny with my brother now because I was trying to show him instructions, and we were doing science before for his homework, and then we were doing maths, which was a lot of fun. And we used to just laugh because I was like, "You're not taking in any of this, are you?" And he goes, "No." And I remember I explained the quadratic equation to him before, and he just turns to me, and I don't know if you remember There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis. He just goes, "You have a milkshake, and I have a milkshake. I drink your milkshake." I start roaring laughing. I was like, We call it a day, will we? And he was like, yeah, we'll call it a day. um, but we can have those laughs, and like he can joke with me about my autism, and I can joke with him about being gay. I won't say it for you now, but it's funny and it's not offensive. Like we both have a laugh about it. I think that as well. These do-gooders that go, oh, you can't say that, and you're like, I can have a laugh. Like I've two mates who are autistic, and we have a laugh. We take the piss out of autism all the time, which I think is fine. Like why'd you have to be so serious all the time? Why so serious? Love the Joker and Heath Ledger's Joker, R.I.P. Heath. Um, what a great actor, great performance. It's such a tragedy what happened to him, but he will be remembered. Yeah, so I didn't expect this video to be as long as it is, but what's your thoughts on it? Like, do you think pitying disabled people is the way to go? Like, I know there are some people who have really bad mental and physical ailments. I feel like the fact that we're in a very much stress based learning system does not help. And I find that never helped me, when someone's shouting at you, don't fuck up, or, learn under pressure. I don't learn very well under pressure. Most people don't. And I think I'm just more sensitive to that. I learn best with clear, concise instructions, and I think we all do. I don't think there's anyone alive that learns best when some fucker's screaming at them and saying that if they fuck this up, that's it, they're done. Their future is over. They fucked everything up. I wonder, why is that? Because, and I've used dialectical behavioural therapy, you cannot rationalise when you're in your emotional brain, because things are just firing off and hitting that primitive lizard brain, the amygdala. And the amygdala is very much, get me the fuck out of here now. You know what I mean? It's not thinking, I want to stay here and learn. It's, I need to get the fuck out of here. There's a threat right now. Some fucker screaming at me, that's a threat. I need to get away from the threat. So either I zone out and just dissociate, so I'm not taking in anything at all. I run, get the fuck out of there, or I fight the person screaming at me. I can freeze as well, which would be dissociating, I guess. But you know what I mean? If someone is roaring at you, putting the fear of God into you, which a lot of times with the leaving cert, when you're supposed to be learning, it's like if you don't get this, you're going to fail your leaving cert and amount to nothing. And you're just thinking to yourself, how is this helpful? How the fuck is this helpful? And doing dialectical behavioural therapy, it's been proven scientifically now. Nobody's taking in anything when you start using fear tactics to get them to learn. They just don't do it. And I was like, eureka, aha. And being neurodivergent, it explains why it was particularly bad for me, because I'm more sensitive to shit like that. You know what I mean? Like, as a young kid, my fucking amygdala was firing all the time. I'd constant anxiety just pounding away at me like that. So then you put me into a classroom and you start shouting at me and telling me that I'm thick, or, that if I don't learn this, I'm done for. And then in rugby training and football training, go that way, now go this way, go, what the fuck are you doing? You're getting it wrong, what are you at? It's like, oh, what? That's why I always hated training a lot of the times, because I thought to myself, there's 50 lads shouting over each other here, each one of them saying a different thing. So what are we doing? You know what I mean? And that's why I can empathise a lot with new guys in the team, because even as a more senior member of the team, I often could relate to the fact that they're being given a million and one different instructions, and everyone is arguing with each other about it. You go there, now you go there, now you go, and it's like, what the fuck is it? I just feel like the world that we have now, and I mean, it always has been built for neurotypical people, isn't it? Like, neurodivergent people are often shunned, even though they contribute a hell of a lot to society and always have done. But they're mocked, they're laughed at, they're shunned, because often they're not looking for status or, how would you even put this? They don't even necessarily want praise. There's a right and a wrong way of doing things, and that's how they see it: right, wrong. Um, and a lot of them want a better society, like I do, and I know a lot of people like me do as well. But And sadly, they'll always be used and abused because there's egotistical pricks who just want to steal somebody else's work and then get rich and famous off it. But us neurodivergents can contribute a hell of a lot to society if we're just given the chance. And I wish to God they wouldn't just say that you won't, you can't, and you don't, because you don't know until you try. I think that's a good place to leave it. You won't know until you try. Give it a go and see how you get on. We all have different thresholds, yeah, but we can all get there. And I feel like dialectical behavioural therapy and compassion focused therapy are two brilliant ways of not only having compassion for others but yourself, and also realizing if you're highly stressed and you're in your threat mode and your amygdala is being hijacked, you're kind of going to yourself, I cannot learn. I need to fight, I need to run, I need to freeze or appease, like, oh, I'm sorry, and all that stuff. It's not a logical, oh, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn this. No, it's get me the fuck out of here now, you know? Whereas if you're rational, you're like, oh, I see how that works, yeah, so if I do this and then that, you know what I mean? Makes perfect sense. But why the fuck we don't do it, I don't know. But something to think about, guys. Let me know your thoughts. And gotta just say, a lot of people that do watch the videos, and I sound a bit like Stephen Bartlett from Diary of a CEO, but some of my videos get like over 500 views, and there's some that have gotten over 1,000. And if you like the stuff, subscribe and you'll see more. You might not like every video I make, but there might be something in here that you do like. And share the channel as well, because we're trying to grow the channel and get to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I need your guys' help to do it. So I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.